One of the main questions that I get asked often is, am I truly dealing with a narcissist, or they have some kind of mood disorder such as bipolar disorder? And I really understand why it is so complicated to comprehend and understand, because there is a lot common in between other mental health issues and narcissism. There is a lot that intersects between the two. And that is what we are going to explore today as we focus on narcissism versus bipolar disorder. What is the common between these two and how you can differentiate one from the other. Hi, I am Danish, a narcissistic abuse recovery professional. Before we begin, make sure that you are subscribed to this channel by pressing the subscribe button if you like this video, and push the bell icon to stay updated with every latest episode that I post here. So to begin with, let's try to understand what bipolar disorder is, and then we'll be able to understand how we can differentiate it from narcissistic personality disorder. Bipolar disorder, as the name suggests, is a person who has it fluctuates between the two extreme mood and emotional states, where one is called a manic state and the other state is called a depressive state. A person who suffers from the serious mental health issues oscillates between the two, where one episode may last from 3 to 7 days or even a week, and they keep fluctuating, and that is what it makes such a huge struggle for them. Let's try to understand the bipolar disorder in depth by understanding what these episodes do to them and what a person experiences when they are going through these episodes. So to begin with, let's focus on mania or a manic episode. When a person is going through a manic episode, the way they think about themselves, the cognition, the thinking part, the way they relate with others, the way they see themselves, it completely changes. And the changes manifest in their behavior. The main changes you would see in their cognition is there are delusions of grandeur. They think highly of themselves. There is an exaggerated perception of self. And also, they have the ideas and the thoughts that are grandiose and almost do not make any sense given what their reality is. You would see that they compare themselves to kings, and they have an unlimited concept of their capability, perception of their power, and so on. And the other traits that this mania is characterized by is impulsivity. They are very impulsive. If they get onto something, they just, without giving it a second thought, they just take the risk and just go on and keep doing it. For example, if it comes to spending money, if they decide to do so, they would take the risk. They would just go on into the investments and buy everything, spend everything, and be reckless. They are hypersexual, which is they might be overdrawn to sexual activity. If we focus on, or if we talk about the changes in their physiology, you may see that there is a blurriness in their speech. Their speech doesn't make sense, or they talk too fast. It just goes on. They keep shifting and jumping from one idea to the other, and the other person, who is the receptor of all of this, does not understand what they are trying to talk about. When we talk about mania and when we focus on bipolar 1, which is a type of bipolar disorder, the mania is so extreme, the manic episode is so extreme that it almost can turn into psychosis. That is the loss of touch from reality. While as if we talk about bipolar 2, which is the other form of bipolar disorder, we have something called hypomania, where a person may experience all the things that a person who has bipolar 1 experiences, but the intensity of those things would be low. Meaning they can have the delusions of grandeur, but they would somehow or at some level would be touched with the reality. They may overwork and overdo things and keep going on and on and on, but it isn't as extreme as in bipolar 1, because bipolar 1 or bipolar disorder overall is a very serious mental health issue, and in many cases when someone is experiencing a manic episode, they require hospitalization. This is how serious it may get. But with bipolar 2 and hypomania, which is low grade mania, that may not be the need, and that is where it may be misunderstood as narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. We'll be comparing the two a little bit later, but let's try to understand the other episode, which is depression or depressive episode. When someone or a person who suffers from bipolar disorder goes through a manic episode, it is given, it's 100% given that they are going to transition into what is called a depressive episode. A depressive episode is characterized by guilt, sadness, loss of motivation, loss of energy, suicidal thoughts, everything that is quite opposite of how they were in the manic episode. And the transition is quite steep. They just go all the way up and then go all the way down. And the oscillation, the fluctuation happens, and there may be a gap of a week between the two, but it ultimately happens, which means there is no persistence. And that tells us that it is not a personality style, it is a mood disorder. It is how your mood changes, is the extreme changes in your mood and your affect. And then when we talk about specifically focus on hypomania or mania, someone who is going through this episode may show the characteristics of a narcissist through the delusions of grandeur, through the ideas they have, through the way they express these ideas, the way they see themselves, the way they are impulsive, the way they are intolerant to criticism, the way there are impairments in how they see others and how they compare with others, the way they become and can become abusive in such a state. So someone can misunderstand, that is a point where it gets interesting, and someone can misunderstand it as narcissism. But we need to understand that narcissistic personality disorder is a personality style, a personality disorder. And when we talk about personality disorders, we talk about persistence, resistance, consistency, continuum. However, in a bipolar disordered person, we do not see that continuum. We do not see that persistence. There is alteration. There is an oscillation between the two states like a wave. It's a given that someone who is just bipolar, they may not be open to criticism. They may not be, they may look down on others, and they may have an exaggerated sense of self, but it is not stable. It is very temporary, and it's gonna go away when they go into that depressive state. But when we talk about a narcissist, you are going to see this pattern of arrogance, jealousy, hostility, vindictiveness, all of those characteristics, they are consistent, persistent, and present throughout the course of the time. They do not change, they do not come down, they do not shift. Of course, you may see the alteration in their emotional state, because after all, narcissism, one of the main components of narcissism is emotional dysregulation, but it is not like, as extreme as it is in bipolar disorder. A narcissist also, when there are no episodes, basically, you do not see them, you do not see those major extreme changes in their speech, the way they talk. They may talk faster, they may do something called word salad, but the intention is different. It's not a mood shift. They are doing it with an intention of manipulating you. They are conscious and aware of what they are doing, and they're quite stable, like near the baseline when it comes to what their personality style is. And that is the core difference between narcissism and bipolar disorder, and that is what differentiates the two. But again, it can become confusing when if we compare hypomania with narcissism, because who someone who does not go to that extreme level and just is hypomanic can be misunderstood as a narcissist, and because they do not show those extreme levels, they are just almost like there is a lot of overlap between how things happen in hypomania and how things are with a narcissist or in narcissism. But the main key that you have to understand whenever you are confused to get your answers is that that hypomania, no matter how low grade mania it is, it changes. And when the person who experiences bipolar disorder, when they are in a depressive episode, they are suicidal, which a narcissist never is. They are ridden with guilt and shame, which they never are. Even though narcissist has a lot of shame, but it's all suppressed, they suppress it with a false self, while as there is no false self in case of a person who suffers from bipolar disorder. So it's quite evident. If you just look a little bit deeper, you would see the noticeable differences. The key is persistence, continuum, and consistency in the personality style, and the inconsistency and the turbulence in the bipolar disorder, which is again a mood disorder. To expand on this further, I'm going to do a workshop on the topic of confirming you are dealing with a narcissist on October 1st and November 2nd. The booking is going on and is open for only next 2 days. If you really want to explore this in depth and you really want to understand how you can misunderstand one mental health issue for narcissism and how you can differentiate the two, just click the link in the description and book your seat. If you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're watching this on Instagram, make sure that you click the link in bio and book your seat before the seats are filled. I'll talk with you very soon and see you on the other side. Till then, let the healing begin.